Wow. Hello everyone, welcome to Bound in Prose. I am your host Matt, and today I am going to be talking about Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian. Now, this book has been on my TBR for quite some time. A few years ago, whenever I was reading like In Cold Blood, East of Eden, which if you've seen my top 10, you know that was kind of the turning point for me in getting into more literary fiction, historical fiction. I tried picking this up about that same time and just struggled with it. I mean, the writing style, the lack of punctuation, all those things that are very McCarthy-ish, just made it a little bit above my level at the time. But I've always wanted to come back to it. I've always heard incredible things about it. Anyways, so I have finally gotten back around to reading this. This is my first Cormac McCarthy novel. I know that some of his more popular works are things like The Road, All the Pretty Horses, No Country for Old Men, which I have seen the movie adaptation of No Country for Old Men, but this is my first McCarthy novel. And what a way to jump into his body of work. So the story follows our protagonist, the Kid. He is from Tennessee, and we only ever know him as the Kid. And he makes his way to the, I almost said Texaco, the Texas-Mexico border in the 1850s. So post-Mexican-American War and pre-American Civil War. And so there is still a lot of division between all of these forces from Mexico, America, and then some of the Indian tribes that were in the midst of these two forces. So the Kid ends up with the Glanton Gang, which is based on a true gang at the time that went out and would kill and scalp parties. It didn't have to necessarily be Indians, but scalp other parties for pesos. And so, yeah, this book takes place and really gets you in the midst of this violent, conflict between all of these groups. So given that synopsis and what's occurring here in this book, I will say that even though I am no stranger to violent content, I like me some scary movies, I've read a lot of horror novels, that kind of thing. I'm intrigued by true crime. This is up there with some of the most violent, brutal, unflinching content that I have been exposed to. And McCarthy has his point that he makes in this. But yes, this is a very difficult book to get through. And if you're not a fan of that kind of content, you don't want to read about some of the most inhuman acts of violence, then skip this one. If you feel like you can stomach that kind of content, there is a lot going on here. There is a lot to deconstruct, to analyze, and to think about. And I would say that this is one of the densest, tiny books that I have ever read. It's 350 pages, but this is not a book that you rush through. This is not a book that you turn your brain off and just get through it so you can, check it off on Goodreads. This is something to be mulled over and discussed and analyzed and debated for all the right reasons. We have a fairly large cast of characters here. Some get more screen time than others. We have the Kid. We have some of the people that he meets along the way before he gets involved with the Glanton Gang, like Toadvine. We have Captain White. And they go to all these different towns and stuff like that. And then he finally ends up meeting Glanton and joining the Glanton Gang. And then from there, they go out and really start to hunt down like the Apaches and the Yuma and Mexicans and just whoever is not part of their gang suffers their wrath. But then we have another character. And if you've read this book, you know who I'm going to talk about next. So I would say that even though none of the characters in this book have any redeeming qualities, there is one that stands out far and away as one of the most terrifying, horrifying villains that I have either read or seen in any piece of fiction, and that is Judge Holden. Now, I know that the Glanton Gang is based on a real gang, and I know that Judge Holden is based on a real person. I don't know if there was a real Judge Holden or if it was just based on, somebody similar, but yes. So Judge Holden to me is the most compelling character in this novel, and I mean, it's like the same as if you were like reading true crime or watching something true crime, like intriguing in that, like disturbing, like how could anyone, act this way, think this way. And so there's a lot of debate on Judge Holden and what he represents. The first time we meet this character, he comes into a revival in a tent, and the preacher is preaching, and Judge Holden goes up to the front and addresses the congregation and basically calls the preacher a pedophile and says that, he's wanted in Fort Smith for having congress with a goat, and just riles up the congregation. And even though it's not explicitly stated, it's alluded to that the congregation kills the preacher. I mean, they're so shocked and outraged. And then not 10, 15 minutes later, some of the townspeople come to Judge Holden as he's sitting in a bar, and they're saying, how did you know about this person? How did you find out all the horrible things that he did? Were you in Fort Smith with him? And the judge basically says, I've never been in Fort Smith. I don't know if he was ever in Fort Smith, and I've never seen him before today. And so the judge just went in and lied about this preacher to get the townspeople riled up, just to cause chaos. And that is the introduction to this character. Now, it's not the most vile thing he does in this book. So, yeah. And there's a lot of debate on what this character represents. I mean, later they find him when, the kid has joined the Glanton Gang and they're out, and they just come across the judge sitting on a rock in the middle of the desert, and he joins the gang, and he knows all of this. He's so knowledgeable, and he has his journal that he keeps, and keeping notes about different plants and animals and this kind of stuff. And he says that the reason he does this is to expunge it from the memory or the knowledge of man. And then one of the most famous quotes from the book is the judge says, anything that exists in nature without my knowledge exists without my consent. And so there's a lot of those kinds of lines that just make your skin crawl when you're reading about the judge. And so anyways, some people have said that the judge is the devil. And at the beginning, whenever he goes in to talk to to accuse the preacher at the beginning of the book, the preacher says there he is, there's the devil, and so whether or not the preacher is accurate or not, I can buy that he is, and I know that there's a video online analyzing evil by the Vile Eye who argues that he is the devil, and I'm of the camp that it's a bit more complex than that. And one of the things that the judge says later on, which is kind of the thesis of the novel, is that war endures as long as men need it. And so, yeah, that's what this book is about, is that violence is going to endure as long as humans exist, and that war and violence was waiting for us before we were even, created. It's a very bleak theme, but look at the world around us today. Can you really argue against it? And so I would love to be able to sit here and go through all the different beats and scenes and things in this novel. There are other videos out there that have done that better, and before I even made this review, I was kind of making my way through Wendigoon's video, and it's 5 hours, and I intend to watch every bit of it. I think that this book has really intrigued me, and I'm so excited to continue mulling it over and thinking about it and the different contexts and what certain things mean, and getting all the literary references. I mean, on the back it says that this is a conflation of the Inferno, the Iliad, and Moby Dick, and I don't see some of those quite as much. And I actually misread that whenever I had started the book. I thought it was saying that it was just like the Iliad and Moby Dick, and I was like, I'm really getting like Inferno from this. And so, anyways, but yeah, this reads like a descent into a nightmare. I mean, and it absolutely is. So, also the reason I don't think I'm going to be able to sit here and go through all of the different like scenes and stuff is because this book is basically, here's a stunning description of a landscape, and now they come upon some people who aren't them and they slaughter them. And I don't say that to try to water down or oversimplify what this novel is, because there is so much to dig into. I only say that because if I were to go through the scenes, it would be like, here's a stunning vista of a landscape that's very well described, and then here's a massacre, and then here's a landscape, and here's a massacre, and here's another landscape, and then there's more people that they slaughter and scalp. I mean, that's what the book is, but when you dig into the meat of it, it's very complex, and there's a lot of different angles to come at this from. And I could sit here and make a 30-minute video just on Judge Holden, but I'm not going to do that. So if you are interested, just go ahead and pick it up. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the other aspects of this book so that I don't put another 25-minute video on YouTube this week. So McCarthy's writing style, his prose is absolutely stunning, and yes, very intellectual, very descriptive, beautiful wordsmithing. Now here is where he might turn some people off, is Cormac McCarthy does not use a ton of punctuation. So yes, he does use some periods here and there, but there are no quotation marks for the characters. There are very few commas. There are really no like semicolons or question marks or anything like that. It is very stripped down in its writing style, but in a way I feel like that really works for this, because the characters and their approach to violence and their desensitization to violence is very just bland. There's like so little emotion in it. I mean, you kind of understand that they get some enjoyment out of it, but it is so impersonal and just straightforward and brutal. And so I think that the writing style and that lack of punctuation actually represents the philosophies or the mindsets of our characters fairly well. I will also say that the ending of this book I was a little confused with, so I'm not sure. I get the main theme that violence and war endures, and that as long as we're human, that will occur. I mean, war and violence is not going to go away. But the final scene between the judge and the kid was a little confusing to me. And then the epilogue, I have no idea. I have no idea what that means, what's going on. So, you know what? If somebody out there would love to illuminate the epilogue for me, please do, because I'm a little lost. Another thing about McCarthy's writing style, and so I have heard it described as neo-biblical, which I think is really interesting. I think, yes, I get that. But I also get, well, like it says on the back, like Inferno, it's like a Homeric epic in some ways. Paradise Lost, I've also heard, compared with this. But I think that works so well. And the more and more I think about it, the more and more I want to dig into it further. I mean, it's so full of symbolism and literary references. And I kind of feel like I'm rambling as I'm doing this because my brain is working a million miles an hour. I finished this last night and I've been thinking about it ever since, and I've been watching other videos on it because I just find it so intriguing. So whenever I finished it last night, I was really struggling between a 4 or 5 star rating for this. And I want to be a little bit more conservative with what I give 5 stars. And so last night, whenever I finished it, I had read like the last 75 pages or so. And there had been a section where, I mean, he'd been describing the land again. And granted, it is gorgeous writing and paints such a picture. But there was just a time or two when I was kind of like, okay, like, get back to like the actual storyline, what's happening. But then I woke up this morning after I had been thinking more about it, and I was like, that complaining about the descriptions of the land is a little like failing to see the forest for the trees kind of a scenario. And so, but this book is sticking with me, and some of the scenes and the lines and the discussions that I have watched in other videos, any book that can do that, can engage you in that way and get you to, you know, want to dissect it more and analyze it, and that just kind of sticks in your mind like that, I think is a perfect 5-star type of book. I mean, so anyways, I updated it to 5 stars this morning. I am very excited to one day go back through this book, and I know I will. The other thing that this book has done is intrigued me to read more McCarthy. And so, yeah, so Blood Meridian, an excellent way to start off my journey with Cormac McCarthy. I very much look forward to reading some of his other works, and like I said, going back through this one. So that's going to do it for this week, folks. I'm trying to keep myself a little bit more on task for this video and just kind of give you the basic thoughts, and enough to maybe, if you've been interested in Blood Meridian, to get you to go, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and pick it up. And so, and that way, not every video on my channel is 40 minutes long. And so, anyways, yes. So thank you so much for joining me this week. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for all of the support so far. If you haven't, I have some other videos out right now. I have my review on Covenant of Water, 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I have my top 10 favorite books. I have an interview with my brother Justin talking about his journey to becoming a reader, even though he has dyslexia. And then I have a vlog that came out last week where I sat down and we read through David Copperfield. So I'm very excited to be on this reading journey, and I'm so grateful that you are joining me for some of it. So anyways, I will see you again soon, and happy reading. The whole review, I'm just sitting here going, what? Why didn't you bring up this thing with Judge Holden? And why didn't you talk about this literary reference? And whatever. You're not really like covering all of the really intriguing stuff about this book, and you're kind of being very vague, and nobody's going to think you're smart. And so, social anxiety, even though only my camera is watching.